You're more honest with me than you are.
Thank you for joining us. There's comics and Kiwis and comic books at episode 4, and we're quite excited because we're going to get a lesson about comics in New Zealand for the 30 years, and also with Stu Colson from Heroes Book Sale, as well as like what that's been like in Auckland especially. And I've been to back in like 2007 and throughout the years when I've been to Auckland in the past before that, when I bought comics from there. Oh, there's an action figure always falling down from the shelves. So Stu, I want to put you on solo, and I'm going to ask you to give us a short bio, and then we'll punch it in from there and see how we proceed with that.
Okay, I opened up in 1994 out in Papatoe, and then moved into Queen Street after 4 years of trading there, and then up onto K Road, where we ran for just over 20-something years across 2 different locations. I got into comics because as a kid I read them and thought this is really what I want to do. Prior to comics, I was involved in software, and I wrote the world's first rewards program for point of sale in a project with Kmart, New Zealand Statistics Department, and Auckland University Marketing, and kind of burnt out at a young age. So at the age of about 24, I had very little time off. I'd work most weekends. I thought I had enough money to open up a shop, and thought, I'm going to do it. Who cares? Who cares if it goes wrong? So I opened up out in Papatoe, which was a massive learning experience. Made plenty of mistakes, yeah. But I remember my first 2 months of ordering, bringing in 30 copies of Hellblazer and 3 copies of X-Men, and realizing very quickly that I had to pay attention to what people wanted and not what they thought they wanted, which probably leads into later on with Comic Up. But yeah, that's basically been it. I've read comics for a job for 30 years. Got involved in schools a lot. We've done some school projects as well. We have an 11-week 11-week workbook that we've created for primary and intermediate schools, and I've taught that in plenty of schools. I do lectures for the New Zealand School Library Association, and go to their biannual meetings and sort of talk about comics. And then we often have sort of 15 to 20 librarians come in to the shop at night on a Tuesday a few times a year, and we explain why you should be stocking more graphic novels in your library, and basically try to work with them to get past their reluctant reader stage, sort of use comics as a way to get people to read for pleasure. That's what we're doing with that. How's that?
Not
Awesome. I love that.
Good.
Yeah. The library, like when I was down in Chicago, this is like about 2003, 4, reading a adaptation of Death of Superman and Nightfall, Gotham, the earthquake. I don't know what it was called, but it was by Greg Rucka. That got me into Superman, and that got me into Batman, like 15 years after I'd already been in comics hard out, almost like, I think, and because that was in the library, and I could see that, and I got that, and then I would get all the trade paperbacks that were there that I didn't see on the shop, in the comic shop, and so I was able to read on that. And so then after that, I went, I should ask them to order some now. What do I like? So I went down my list and went do, and they brought it in. I moved to Auckland. I went to Pakuranga, and that was my, the hometown there. At that point, I did the same thing. 20. Here's your 20 list. Please bring them in, and they did. And I was like, it was just awesome. And the same thing again with like Auckland Library when I was living in Simon Street in 2007. Same thing. Hey guys, can we get this in because you don't have it? I want to read it, and boom. Now I'm not the only one reading it now. Now there's like probably 100 other people who didn't see that come and read that. So that's pretty cool. So do you have any questions on that, Rex?
Yeah, I was going to ask this Stu a little later on in the episode, but you mentioned library, so I'll bring it up now. I know that in the past you've sort of given a lot of advice to sort of New Zealand comic creators about how important being able to get their work into libraries is. Could you sort of touch on that a little bit, and sort of, you've got sort of a unique strategy that I sort of haven't come across before. So I wanted to sort of, I don't know how to broach the subject, but yeah, sort of touch on that a little bit, and sort of let's go into that.
Well, we have a captive market with a lot of librarians who trust us is the big thing. So we have plenty of librarians who actually just ring up and say, Stu, here's our budget. Can you just fill it for us? And we, we just go and pick based on what they've previously been getting and who the school is. What is the demographic? So, an Auckland private Catholic schoolgirl high school is going to be getting something very different to an East Coast rougher school. So we'll stock Viking stories and stuff into the East Coast stores, and then we'll stock a lot more manga into the schools in Auckland for Catholic schoolgirls. But the thing is, 95% of the librarians are women. So one of the things is, if you're going to do a graphic novel and you want me to put it into a library, drop the misogyny. That's pretty much the biggest tip I can give you. So for school librarians, two of the things that they are always looking for is stories without sex and without drugs. And it's not naivety on this librarian's part that these 15-year-olds aren't smoking a doobie or whatever and getting it on the weekend. It's that age group is being bombarded with those messages everywhere. They go on TikTok. It's sex and drugs is everywhere in pop culture and wider society. And the librarians are like, can we give them a space where that's not the only message? So do you have smart stories that our kids can read that we know is, clear? Mike McNoll is probably the best. The guy can write horror without having to go into any of that and without swearing. If you read if you read Hellboy, it is a clever story without all of those extra parts. So the librarians trust us. So if I go and drop a bunch of, if you're a New Zealand creator and you come up with a semi-decent graphic novel or well-produced comic, that's part of it. I mean, it's got to last the distance in a library, and it's got naked women and stuff in it. The librarians are like, Stu, what are you doing? But if you don't, then hey, my order from you for your comic that you've spent 6 months or a year a labor of love on, if you chuck a tank top on that girl, I can get it into another 40 schools. Without it, you've just you've halved the order. And so that's a part of what I'm talking about. And I think it's, if you can avoid swearing and some of those topics in a comic and make it sell, or make the story really relevant, you've probably written a better story. If you rely on that kind of the edginess of, Granddad says the F-bomb regularly, I don't know what our rating is on this show, then that's a different kind of joke to, setting it up without it. So I think it's clever.
I think I actually did this this morning, like where I was lettering a new fantasy series called Zealandia, and the main lead is 2 females, right? Then it becomes 1 female, and then becomes dragon person type thing. And then I'd written in one spot which was just like her thinking back, because it had to do with what was happening, and she was thinking that I don't want that happen to me. And I thought, we decided about a week ago that this is going to be a teen book, not a mature book, because it was going to be a mature book. And then it's decided, no, this is going to be a teen plus book. And so I looked at the work and I went, I wrote this in, and my artist, did a mock-up of that panel. And I went, we're going to remove that now, because we're no longer going to use that, because that one thing doesn't belong there, because this is now for a teen market, teen plus market, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, that sort of thing. And I think it's more about what your aim is for the market. If you want to do a niche book to a certain audience, then you can do that, right? But if you want, like you said, like it feels like, I'm also going to contest you on this, right? Do you think it's like, are the females there? And I also agree with what you just said about what they want. they don't want drugs, they don't want sex in there because they already see it around. I'm the same when it comes to rap music, right? I don't want to see either N word in every second word because they're not telling me nothing. And but even though I love rap music and I always have, but do you think they're also kind of like gatekeeping? Because I remember back in 2007, 2008, when I was at Auckland, Summer Street, and I was able to, they got in girls, and by Alan Moore, right? And so it was there, but it was an adult section, right? And I read that, right? And I was like, wait, this is a bit weird, but I'm glad it wasn't an adult section. It wasn't for the kids section. And that's what I was thinking, like, are they just trying to like, not realize that this is for the adults and then they can do that? Can they get graphics for the adults and and I'm talking about as a New Zealand creator, a comic creator, can they put our books, like say for the mature adult section there away from that? And will they then accept my, all ages teenage book over there? And that'll be okay? Or are they going to gatekeep the adult stuff out?
Librarians are doing a lot for their students, right? So you take a school with 1,500 kids in it, and the teachers and the librarians, they're not stupid. I mean, they miss some, and that makes the papers, but they know that there's some students that could probably do with a little bit of help that they may not be getting at home, and they might be questioning their own sexuality, and they come from a very strict Christian or whatever background where that might be something that's not discussed. So there's some books that we will supply to libraries that they will have behind the counter. They're not going to put out on the rack, but it's they know which student they can say, you might want to read this at lunchtime. There's just some things that you might be struggling with that are contained in this story, right? So librarians are working for the kids and all that. And same with the teachers. They know what's going on with some of their students privately at home and what's going on. We only read in the papers the one that they get wrong, but they certainly do a lot of help. The problem with that is those type of books tend to be the ones that have gained massive international attention, something like Genderqueer or something like that, which I'm going to say I thought it was an appalling graphic novel. I read it, and I think it missed some points, and I thought that the person who was the thread of that just had terrible parents. I don't think they struggled with many of the things that they went through. But Laura Dean keeps breaking up with me. Those kind of things can really help some kids. But if you're gonna go down that path, you're gonna be censored. You're gonna have that, and you're also potentially making more work for us and the librarian. That what's the value here? Are we going to go into if you're going to put that into a comic, do we then have to ring each school and say, hey, look, we're going to supply this to you. This might be appropriate for 3 or 4 kids that might have this scenario, which is well beyond our remit. That's not what we should be doing. We shouldn't be doing it for you. We shouldn't be doing it to the library, and we shouldn't be pressuring the library to take that to then read it and say which few kids we want this to go out to.
Right.
Yeah.
Just write it for the wider audience. I think that's the safest. Is the best way?
Is it more sort of how do I put this, to sort of doing it tastefully? You mentioned sort of misogyny and sort of scantily clad women. I mean, surely you could have sort of maybe the female form, but it's maybe we shouldn't dwell on this. I don't know, but but
this was
is it
like
sort of doing it for getting male attention? Is that sort of the issue, you think? Or
I mean, if you're trying to get male attention, have you heard of the internet? You're competing with some pretty there's better options out there for it. And that's why I always think smarter and clever storytelling is always going to win out over a bit of TNA. But there's a market for it. That stuff does sell to a degree. I just think it's harder to get a bigger audience with it. Is that sort of you think that kind of demographic? If you were a creator, let's say you're a sort of blueprint, kind of brainstorming stories and being conscious of opportunities in the market. Is that as a
you've been a retailer for 30 years. Is that sort of the biggest demographic, do you think, that has the most opportunity? Or, I mean, what talk a little bit about that.
Smart stories. That's the hook, man. That's what, then I'm hoping you guys have read Saga. I mean, the sex content in that is pretty high, and that was
Romeo
the
and Juliet in
comic
space.
that was the comic that when that came out. That's the one we send out the email. Here's what's arrived, and that's the one that had people running in. What's happening next in that story? But it was, I mean, I've been married for a long time. It was loving sex in Saga. It was never anything.
Sure.
There was never misogyny. That she runs that relationship. So again, it's clever storytelling. That's a big part of it. I've always thought it was hilarious. I would love to see how Fiona dealt with the scripts that she was getting sent. This is what you've got to draw this month, to be like, oh man, Brian, what's going on? Stories that are sex driven. I mean, Sex Criminals from Image, which was, I think, Chip Zdarsky. It sold okay. But even on a flip side, one of the things, we run a graphic novel club once a month as well, so to keep it all busy. And the month that we did Barbarella, which is a real, a lot the guys in the group.
Dynamite.
Barbarella Dynamite. They were all. They all said I would never have picked this up because the cover is Barbarella is scantily clad.
Yeah.
But when you dive into the story, she is an intergalactic James Bond who is a great spy, assassin, soldier, lover, who exactly the same as James Bond. She saves the planet, and then she sleeps with whoever she wants, whatever gender that person is how she feels on the day. And so all of the guys who read it at first never realized how powerful a character she was. They all assumed that the Barbarella comic, because she was drawn in a bikini with a gun, it was your kind of, just TNA rubbish. And a lot of them were like, oh, I'm getting more of this. This is fantastic. A lot of them then went and watched the film again, the Jane Fonda movie.
Jane Fonda.
Their idea of it. So the perception of it is, if you put that on a cover, you can actually drive people away who assume that it's actually not a clever story, that you're just, she's in a bikini and we're selling that. The Zenoscope comics, I'm pretty sure what we sell of that is because of the cover each month when people order it. We don't sell a lot of Zenoscope, but we don't sell consecutive issues. So that to me says someone's ordered this because they like the cover.
Right.
If you're getting Grim Fairy Tale number 52 and you don't get another copy till 67, it's basically you like it this time around.
Yeah, I've been like that for the past 2 years with with mainstream comics. I just like the cover. That's it. I just like it. It's in my collection. I don't read it because I don't really enjoy the stories anyway. So I just buy it for the comics.
I think these people are liking the covers for other reasons.
Like give me a good Batman pose with a good artist, or even like a Daredevil when I just saw that I had Peach, whatever her name is, like her name is. Monoka. Yeah, I just found out that I had a Peach Monoka variant cover because I just liked her art. Don't know much about her, but I love the art, and I was like, that's part of my thing. There are that, right? And so art is holding, I had a conversation earlier with a comic creator about that, how art is what's the speculative market is with the variant covers is what's kind of like keeping people coming in. But you're also saying with your side that it's keeping people continuing to come in with good storytelling. And that's something that we had a discussion last week for 3 hours about why is manga doing better than mainstream American comics, right? And it was like, you got a single vision and you got relationships, and that's what, like you just said, like Catholic school, right? Why are they reading the manga? Because there's relationships there, and they're good relationships, and there's trials and tribulations and what have you, but there are good relationships there and escapes from whatever's happening at home, whatever's happening in the world. And it's a good escapism. And you're, one thing that, like, as a writer myself, I'm always testing myself, but I also look at other people as well, and I think a lot of time people don't look at other people for advice, or like we're doing with you, right? Asking you about these things and picking your brain, because that's 30 years of knowledge is encased in that little, silver head, right? Which we are going to try to ask the right questions, like Rex is doing, to get that knowledge out, that gold that's there. And so, Rex, is there any other questions you got before we move on to?
Plenty. Let's. I mean, you did bring up a good point, Stu, about manga versus the West. I mean, I had some questions sort of noted down, and I'm sort of trying to figure out how to kind of rotate to them. I mean, it's very difficult to sort of get a general kind of idea of how the direct market and how the industry is going. Maybe you're in a different position than I am, but being sort of just a casual reader, you go on YouTube and either the sky is falling, or things are growing and it's great. So I mean, I did want to ask at some point sort of how things are positioned in the Western market, and particularly as a retailer in New Zealand.
Just come back to what you guys were talking about before, about how you had a Peach Momoko cover and you didn't read it. And there's a part of the industry that retailers who hate the variant market, and they're like, people are just buying it and they're not reading these, and I'm like, why do you care? They are buying it from you, right? That's paying your rent. That's the deal. So when I opened up 30 years ago, there were, I think Auckland had 12 shops called Card Crazy or something like that going on, like the trading card boom. I opened up just at the very end of it, and I remember getting 2 boxes of a basketball card. Like, these were going to be the Flair whatever, and I was told, you got to get these, and I brought the 2 boxes, put them out, and then I had the rep come in for, what do you want for next week? And I'm like, I'll give you a call on Monday. And I didn't sell a packet. And I never sold a packet from those 2 boxes. And I was like, I don't know anything about this. And I just happened to have probably brought the last 2 boxes at the peak before the trading card market absolutely crashed. So I was lucky it wasn't 2 weeks earlier and someone actually bought some packets, because I probably would have dropped a few $1,000s on boxes of trading cards thinking it was a worthwhile thing. But the whole thing was people were collecting art. And I think that's what the variant cover market is now. People who, there's a group of people who used to collect trading cards at a certain age, whatever, or still would want to. And they're now just buying covers of comics. And the difference is they're pretty much getting the exact cover they want without having to open up a packet and hope of the 10 cards in there that one of them is going to be the one they actually want. They get to see up front, Peach Momoko, man, she is prolific. She's banging out 20 covers a month sometimes. It's huge. There's people who love the Scotty Young and they collect everything he does. And then every now and then Marvel does a particular theme of titles. So the whole the variant covers thing, it's great as a retailer, as long as you're not trying to, Pokemon it and catch them all to put them out. You've got to let people see those covers in advance and have them place the orders before your orders have to be submitted. And if you're doing that right, then variants are great, and they're a good part of the market. And for some stores, if they're doing it properly, they're propping them up. Like if you've got 40 people who are ordering Batman a month, so that particular title is going to make you a couple of $100, and you've got to spread it all out across all the various titles you're bringing in. If you can sell an extra 10 or 15 variants, then you've basically got 55 subs to that title. What do you care? Why would you fight it? Why would you go onto forums and say variants are killing us? There's not enough variants as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you just showing us the kind of covers you like. If there's more of those available that you can order and I can supply them, then great. You get what you want. I can get it for you efficiently. Everyone's happy, right?
Well, I mean, like the other thing is we're about to hit Kickstarter with our own comic book, right? And so we've got so let me just bring up these variants that we're going to be putting out, just so people understand,
just while you're getting that ready. I mean, Because I remember I was in your store one time, Stu, and I think it was a little while ago. It was during the Infinity Marvel event. It would have been a while ago now, a little while ago, Sean. And if you cast your mind back, there were more variants than it was just variant heaven. And I thought, well, I'd maybe buy a variant here or there, and I thought, who is there someone out there who's actually buying all these, collecting them? And I remember one guy, he had a table set out in the middle, and one guy goes, "I'll just take one of everything, please." And it was probably about, I don't know, 12 of the same, cover, which is crazy. I mean, I was going to ask how hard is that to navigate? Obviously, variants, you've got people buying a bunch of number ones. How is that sort of, how do you sort of gauge the demand sort of moving forward? You've got this massive spike initially. How do you sort of know how sort of the landscape of things after this big sort of spike?
The only variants that are a problem are ratio. For me as a retailer, right? If it's a 1 for 25, if I have to order 25 copies to supply one for the main characters, that's pretty cool. But once the third person wants it, it's like, dude, I've got to order 25 copies and I've got to eat them. Okay, I've got no one left to buy these. So, and then it gets down to, so I can't supply it. And then for me, I don't understand. Like, I look at it and go, okay, so the 1 for 25 variant, is that going to be the best artist on this? And they're like, oh, yeah, well, because it's 1 for 25, it's going to have that intrinsic built-in value. So we have to put the best artist on it. I'm like, well, shouldn't the best artist be on the main cover for this book? That the 50 people who've have been buying this book for the last 12 years and supported you as a creator to get to this point, shouldn't they have access to the best artist? So then you're in a situation with, okay, well, then the second best artist is going to be doing the 1 for 25. You want people to pay a premium for the second best artist. So for me, the ratio variant is broken from the very start because of, you have to respect your market. Okay, no matter what you're doing, no matter who you are as a creator or a publisher, you must respect the end user. And I just don't see how a ratio variant does that. And I remember when Fantastic Four launched a few years back, and they did a 1 for 2,000 cover. And one of my Comic Hub clients, he got it, and I was like, he had a customer who wanted it. He's a big Fantastic Four fan. I'm like, what are you going to do with it? And he goes, the other 1,900, we're going to find 2 or 3 images inside there, and we're going to punch them and make buttons. So they have a machine that they make little buttons for. It costs them about 12 cents, and they sell those for $1.50. Yeah. And I'm like, so you're going to have 6,000 buttons? And he's like, yep. And we'll give away 1,000 at Free Comic Book Day, and the rest will sit on the counter, and we'll rotate them. But that's the way they manage some of those. And I'm sorry if I went a bit sideways and I missed your original question. Okay, for me so how do I manage it as a store? That's my retail point of sale tells me. So it's straight away it's separating out for me what are the variant orders. So if issue 1 comes in and we sell 60 or 70 copies, and 40 with the main cover and the other 30 with the variants. When I go to order issue 2, I know I've only got a captive audience of maybe 45, that there might have been 5 people who said, oh, I like that one better, swap me for this. And then you're in the situation of, well, they're going to let me know if they want issue 2 anyway. But I know we're going to get into that a bit later on, but that's a big part of what we do with Comic Hub and why I built that. So,
no, that's cool. So you don't have sort of a bunch of Scotty Young fans sort of skewing the numbers and then kind of they don't show up for the next issue? That doesn't happen?
Well, you've got to look at it from the point of view that they've kind of skewed the numbers. They've kind of made it look better, but my data analysis cuts through that. And so that Scotty Young purchase is essentially, from a data analysis point of view, I can separate that off to be a pack of cards. It's not even included in my ordering analysis, so I don't have to worry about it in the slightest. And if that person wants the Scotty Young's doing the next cover, and it's a different title, I'm not compromised at all. Yeah.
That's a beautiful. Oh, sorry, you go, Aaron. So you go.
Right. So I want to go back a bit to the badge thing. So give me 1 second. I'm going to grab something. I was
Okay.
looking around my wall and I couldn't find it, so I figured out we'll grab this. I got pull a staple from the wall. So here in Whangarei, I know a lot more libraries getting involved with this. So they have extra library books, right? They're tattered books, and going back, and also including this, because as with the Plunge convention that we put on, right from the start, we got the library involved here because I knew these are people that have police clearance, right? So they can be with the kids. And then they have the skills, they know how to work with kids, and they know what needs to be done when they talk with kids, right? I don't have that skill. I mean, I've been a youth leader in the past, so I can talk with 13 and older kids, not the younger ones. So one of the things that I noticed that they did was they were like, hey, Aru, we're going to bring in these things and these things. And I go, okay, cool. It's like, well, we're going to cut up comic books. I'm like, wait, what? And so, yeah, Aru, what we do is we get a punch, and we get the kids and they cut out this circle, and then we show them and they bring it to us and we put it together, and now they've got a badge, right?
Yep.
So this is what we'll do, and we'll give them away free, Aru. And I'm like, what? You're going to cut up comic books? And I remember Shane, right? We were at an art beat, which is happening at the end of this month here in Whangarei. We have it every year. And Shane goes, Aru, come here, dude. Look what they're doing the Dark Knight. I'm like, I'm like freaking out, going, no, not hardcover Dark Knight, not hardcover Dark Knight, dude. Why? And I was like freaking out, and he's like, and Glenn, who's the manager there, and I think in the kids section, and he goes, and Nari, who's amazing people, that we work with, she goes, the end of lines, they've been damaged. The kids we get to recycle it. The kids get to enjoy it. They get to walk around with these characters on, and that's another plus. Now they're actually a part of that thing. Now it's not only just they're reading it. Now they actually get to carry it around on their heads, on their t-shirts, on their bags, and then there's a story behind that hey, we went to the event, we put this on, and they did that. And I think, so one thing that I've done forever is every time we do that, is that I will also myself go and sit down with the kids and and hang out with them and take an hour off or half an hour away from actually running the convention, sit down with the kids and watch them get what they do. And we sit there and go, oh, you need help with that? You need help cutting that? So you're getting involved and then go, oh, use this one. This might be a better picture. And then I'm sitting there cutting up about 8 for myself. And then I'm going around going, hey, thanks for helping out. Here you go. And it's becomes this really interactive thing that the library has brought in.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate
and they have their libraries have their their cycle sheets. They know how often a book has been taken out and read. When was the last time some kid came up and said, I want to take this home? So if you're getting to a book that you and I are all like, you did this to the Dark Knight, and the library's going, no one's taken this out in 6 years, bro. Frank Miller's art is tired. The book's a bit tatty. It's all about Ant-Man at the movies now or Deadpool. Then that's the reality. And the library's only got so much space. They can't keep those books in forever for all of us. Yeah.
I got to bring it home. I actually got to bring this one home, The Dark Knight. But I also did cut up a couple images myself, and then I gave them away. Because
oh my god, I can't look.
It's a funny
but
one.
You look at how it's been so it's been used. I'd hate to know what imagine how old and how long it's been out in the library, right? And so it's been read, in the adult section, right? Because it's a mature book, and so, but then you've got some great art, and you could make them into bags for the kids,
We get people coming in sometimes, and they're like, "Oh, I've got this old desk that I want to upcycle for my kid, so I need 20 comics that I want to tear up and put on it." And you're like, "Okay, well, and then they'll tell you the thing that they really like, and it's the hottest book. And I'm like, "Well, they're $11 a copy," and they go, "Oh no, I just want to tear them up." That's your decision. That's got nothing to do with the price I'm going to sell it to. I can give you some old, 1994 Valiant or Image Comics, and you can tell that, oh no, I need some iconic Batman in this. I'm like, this isn't going to happen, man. This,
Go to the dollar bin, yeah.
I'm going to go to Whangarei Library. They can help you out. They've got some books.
Yeah, sure.
The other thing is, now that they know, who I am, they'll go, hey, look, some people brought in this older comics. Would you like some? And then I actually go hunting for friggin', coloring books. Like, maybe one over here, and like old tattered, like a hospice kind of like Salvation Army tattered books, and go, I've got piles of them now that we can take to the event now and go, here, library, cut these up, and I think it's I think that's where community really works, in the sense, where I have building relationship to actually say, because a library can only do so much, and then if you can help them,
a badge that the kid has made with Batman and Robin on it that they wear for the next 6 months is possibly going to do more to get that kid to want to read Batman than at an age that they're not ready for it, or a graphic novel that doesn't interest them, that doesn't quite have their level. So if you're using that comic in that way, totally, that's probably going to have them more interested in. And one of the things that we have libraries, one of the reasons we got involved with them a lot is, I remember one librarian coming to me and saying, Stuart, we've got 15-year-old boys here that surf the internet by symbols. They're not even reading, they see a Nike swoosh and they click on it from that way. They've never read anything for pleasure in their entire life. So it started off at school with, this is how to read. And now here's the prescribed book that you have to read to understand, that you know what you're doing in reading. And they've, I remember my daughter when I think she was about 7 or 8, and it was school, it was the school holidays. And I was like, hey, do you want to go up to the library, to the Rangi, to see if we can find some books that you might want to look at, because we had them at home. So she liked books, but the idea of her impression of the library, she just says, no way, it's just full of old people that yell at you. So her school librarian was just this grumpy old woman. And I think this for me, this is my passion project about comics, and why I do a lot more of the community-based stuff, and why I love the idea of cutting up comics and making badges out of it, is getting kids to read for pleasure, so they read as an adult for pleasure. Because too many, when we get people in and they're looking to get something for their kid, and I'm like, is there something you want? And they go, I don't read. How do adults say that? And how do they say it with pride? How do you no, I don't read, man. Like, bro, that's not something you want to advertise. Keep that on the down low, man. I mean, it's cool that you're here to help your kid out. Maybe you'd like me to help you, because if that's where you're at, maybe, that Texas Blood or Southern Bastards or something like that might be something you'd actually quite enjoy reading. Because the other thing, if you've got an 8-year-old in your house and it's like, I want to get my 8-year-old to read, the biggest thing you can do if you're a guy and it's your son is read in front of him.
Right.
Because kids just want to mimic their parents, right? So you can't get your 8-year-old to read a comic while you're watching football. They're just or while you're playing PlayStation. You can't turn, no, you should read, that's good fun. They're like, but Dad, you're watching the game. Can't I watch the game with you? But if you're sitting in the lounge quietly reading a graphic novel, then your kid's going to be like, oh, okay, hey, have you got one for me? And they'll pick that up.
Read it with them.
Start reading it with. That's how I got improved my daughter's reading.
Do you think, Stu, that sort of the comic book industry has done enough to kind of get kids sort of like younger kids reading comic books? Sometimes it seems sort of the
hold that question. Let's go back to the parent thing, right? So we've got this here, like by Stephen. He's up in Kaikui. He goes, Steve, J Hunt, he goes, most I know don't know how to read a comic, and that's adults. And that's kind of sad, because their own parents didn't read around them. With me, I think like with Dad, because I'm from Fiji, so I didn't know how to read English when I got here. Didn't know how to speak English properly. So across the road, like over there, like 2 story, houses across the road from me. My mum used to pay this lady to actually teach me how to read. And then I had reading classes until I was 15. Special, get pulled out of class, go read. But the other thing was my dad at home would be reading Stephen King.
Yeah.
Right. He'd be sitting there, TV was off sometimes, and he'd be there reading. And I get, like you said, like I might not have got that, but because I had these adults teaching me how to read, because I didn't know how to read English, and being able to speak and stuff, and like hearing myself talk aloud while Mrs. I can't remember her name, but she's like 40 years old, and I'm here, 8-year-old kid going, the red dog, who was it, like Clifford? I'm reading Clifford, and all that. But then when I went to school, I saw Asterix and Tintin. Now I'm reading Asterix and Tintin now. Years later, I'm reading Stephen King books, right, at 15. And then I'm getting into Marvel and all that stuff. And now I'm encouraging other people to read, right? All that time. If I love something, I'm encouraging people to read comics. Hey, go read 2018 if you're into that. But if you're a dad there and you pride yourself on not being a reader, you're really kind of this, what is it called? This
I think there's sort of a slice of society where sort of, I guess, sort of intellectualism is sort of seen as kind of
snobbery,
kind of weak. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's sort of,
it's misplaced snobbery, because all the studies are, and this is something that we discuss with librarians, is reading a comic is more taxing on your brain than reading a novel or watching a movie, because you're doing your brain has to do multiple tasks. Okay, first it's just reading. Okay, which if you're reading a book, there's the exact same skill level to reading a comic from the point of view of reading the text. Then you have to interpret the image at pace. You have to also work out what happens in the gutter, because all of the action happens between panels. So, there's the fist, and then there's the guy glancing. I mean, it might only be a simple idea of that, but the action happened in between. You weren't told. Right. So there's 3 things going on that your brain has to digest while you're reading. So sometimes when I get friends going, oh, I've never read a comic, and I'm like, look, I can find you something. And then I'll talk to them a couple of weeks later. I was like, what did you think? They said, man, it gave me a headache. And you kind of go, yeah, because it's the Matrix, what's wrong with my eyes? You've never used them before. It's the first time you're using your brain, dude, to interpret a story. You just don't realize that it's actually harder work because of your own inbuilt snobbery, because of, let's not get into them, but because of Frederick Wertham and the Seduction of the Innocent and the comic code, all that BS that basically made the West think that comics were a juvenile art form, while Japan and Asia and Europe marched on.
We touched on that a little bit last episode, Stu, and I mean I've obviously heard of that event, but I don't think I kind of realized how impactful it was in terms of what is being produced today. I thought that happened way back then, So how impactful has it been on sort of the type of comics that are being made?
Everything. It is everything. So the quick answer is, you had the the Reds under the bed, the McCarthy era Senate hearings in America in the 50s, and then they had Senate hearings about comics. And one of the classic things that went wrong was one of the guys from EC Archives, I can't remember his name. This person holds up a comic, and it's a picture of a person holding a woman's severed head, and they say to him, is this appropriate? And he's like, yeah, because it was a horror comic. So that said, if you're going to buy this comic, you're going to find horror inside it. So they decided, this guy Frederick Wertham decided that everyone who'd ever committed a violent crime read comics when they were a kid. Everybody who ever committed the sexual assault read comics when they were a kid, because there wasn't PlayStation, man. That's kind of all you had, back in the 40s and 50s. That's a lot of what you only had, The biggest printed comics, the most comics that were being shipped to soldiers during World War II was romance stories. Okay, that's what all the guys in the trenches. That's what they wanted to read. So kids were reading all these comics at home. You had sci-fis and westerns starting to take off, and the crappiest sort of by sales numbers, was superheroes. Nobody was reading that stuff. You had guys come home from World War II, weren't interested in reading comics about superheroes. Okay, so what happened was they had these hearings, and then what came out of it was the comic industry realized it was about to be slammed, or they were about to be taken down because they'd totally blown it. And so they came up with the self-policing code, which was the Comic
Right.
Code Authority. And what it meant was for distribution around America, the books had, if they didn't have the Comic Code stamp on it, your drugstores, your dairies and all that wouldn't take it because they didn't know what was the content was. And now if you signed up to the Comic Code, if you wrote a crime story, you weren't allowed to show the judiciary or the constabulary in a negative light.
Right.
So you
Wow.
you could not write a crime story where a cop was corrupt or the judge was on the take, right? So you basically, your crime stories kind of just died within about 3 months. That was it. No one was interested because all of a sudden all the crime stories were just lame. You would, this is the best one. You weren't allowed to write a romance story that aroused the baser instincts. So, holding hands,
No kissing, no kissing, no holding
no
hands.
kissing, no nothing. So they had all of these ideas that what you could and couldn't put into stories, and the only thing that was left was superheroes. They were the only stories that were actually able to be published within about 3 months of coming out. Mad Magazine survived by calling itself a magazine. But that, because of the satire and everything it had, Mad Magazine should have been cut as well. But because they said no, we're a magazine, they can carry on printing it. So 1952 or 53, whenever it was, that was it. So that affected Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, America, and Canada. Basically, the English language world. In Europe, they just fascism had just been defeated, and they really weren't interested in the government saying what you were allowed to read, let alone what kids. So comics in Europe took off in a different direction, where it became more sort of art driven, and a lot of it has big world building stuff. Right? It's if you read European science fiction, it's just massive in its scope of the worlds they build. Yeah. The European, the Japanese and manga artist stuff exploded with these tomes of stories, these black and whites that used to get printed in like a phone book, which was the Shonen Jump magazines. Yeah. And then, and so every now and then there'll be some. I hate them. You see them on the news. They trot it out every 10 years. Oh, in Japan, grown men on the train, on the subway, are reading this big book of comics, and I just look at it and go, and in New Zealand, we're not. This is not, Japan's not wrong.
Men are reading there, and why aren't we reading it here, right?
Because here's the biggest thing, right? What can't school teach? Anyone want to take a shot at this? What can you not learn? You cannot teach imagination. Okay?
I got it wrong.
You can only consume ideas to expand on ideas that you already know. So then you have this other group of parents that go, oh, I don't want my kids to read comics. It spoils their imagination. I'm like, oh, dude, the only way you can have ideas is to consume ideas. And what's the fastest way you consume ideas? Comics, if you're reading stories. Like, look how many types of Batman there's been. He has done everything, right? They used to do the Batman black and white statues. Ari, you might have a line on those kind of images.
I wish I had one, man. Out of my expense ranges, I said offline.
Yeah. He's been a Da Vinci Code kind of, Leonardo da Vinci with his cape type Batman. There's been Dracula type Batman. Where all of them, they've done it all. So if you're reading it, and let's just say, what are you going to do for a job? You leave school, you want to go work for Weta Studios, and they're down there and they're saying, oh, we need a costume designer, and you've not read comics. If you've read comics. Yeah. And if you've read a lot of comics, you're going to have a head start on design ideas. Your head is going to be filled with much more images and ideas just because the amount that you've consumed from that. So that's the difference in the three markets. And that's, the European and the Japanese markets are just so much more mature. I think we've caught up now. I think when you look at what Image and such brings out.
Is it a case of just sort of... kind of getting that out. I feel like sometimes that the comic book industry is very insular. It sort of talks a lot to itself. There's a lot of trying to sell, more product to the same people as
Yeah.
opposed to getting new people on board? Is it a case of going, well, hey, people, look at Image, there's all these, it's not just superheroes, there's all these different range of, fantasy, sci-fi. Is that an issue? I mean, I was going to ask kind of, if that happened in the 60s, how do we sort of course correct? How does the industry sort of course
Well,
correct?
we've now got the material to debunk that. Like
Right.
in 1995, you would have struggled to turn around and pull out 20 graphic novels for that. But so now, if we have someone in the shop and they're open to the idea of getting something themselves, our thing is comics is a medium, it's not a genre. Move beyond that, and then we'll be saying something to them like, what type of movies do you like? What type of stories, or if I'm fed up with someone, I'll say, do you go to plays? Do you go to theatre? Because everyone who's highbrow wants to immediately go, oh yes, I go to the theatre, Shakespeare in the Park or whatever. And then so do you watch TV? Do you watch art house movies? And you're like, yeah. So you're not adverse to consuming a story visually. That's what you're telling me. And that's
Right.
So why do you have a problem with the idea of a comic? Why are you going to struggle with that? And a lot of times some adults or some parents will start to read comics because their kids just love them so much that the kids are like, I need the next one, and there's a little bit of what is going on here. So we do have some parents who we can flick a graphic novel to every now and then and work it from that. What are we looking at, Aaron?
Well, you know how you're saying, like, there, like, hold on, that, like, the idea, there was, what was the question you asked there, Rex? And I was thinking, like, there's this 11,000 I
mean, Stu's in a unique position because he's got so much experience, and it was tying into sort of a previous question where, as a reader, it's sometimes hard to kind of get a picture of how the industry is going. So it was sort of tying into that, into sort of the comics code that it is sort of the what would you call it, the image that kind of comic store or comic book reader is. It's like it's all about superheroes. But I guess the question was sitting around, how do you signal to a new person that, one, it's okay to read a comic book, that it isn't, you're not a weirdo if you do, and two, if you're not into superheroes, there is something for you.
There's so much more.
That was what I was thinking about this. So you got 11,781 projects that are not, like, part of that majority would be non-superheroes that's available right now, right, on Kickstarter. And so, but one thing I hope that people think about is to get these into comics stores, right? To support the comic stores, because I love the comic store. That's been my home for, I also owned a comic store. So I want people to go back to the comic store. So my thing is like, all these projects are here. Please complete them and then offer them up to the comic store, and hopefully they're good enough to be in the comic store. And that's so, like, when we get to the comic hubs part of this, that we talk about how that works. But we're saying, like, there isn't enough. There's only Western comics.
I mean, if there is 11,780 projects on Kickstarter for comics, there's a part of me that's saying to these people, let's be honest, man. 95% of what you're going to sell is to your mates. Why are you bothering with a Kickstarter fee? Why aren't you just emailing your friends and saying, hey, look, man, I really want to get into comics. I'm going to put one out myself. And it's almost like it's the same as saying to someone who says, I'm going to walk 10 kilometers to raise money for, I don't know, handicapped kids. Will you sponsor me $1 a kilometer if I do the 10K? There's almost that kind of mentality that really should be applied to a lot of that Kickstarter, where it's someone saying, I'm going to try and produce this, okay, and then go out and do it. And I think a lot of those, you're also at the point where you can't ask a store to get involved at that point, because what are your production values going to be like, man? Are you going to finish this? If I buy 10 copies of you off this, and for some titles that's more than we sell of a mainstream publisher because they're bringing out so much. But if I take 10 copies, I'm going to have to read it and then I'm going to hand sell it. Okay. Now, for me, it's worthwhile reading your one comic and hand selling it to 10 people because you're going to do 4, and I can then sell 3 more that I don't have to hand sell. I've done the work up front. There's people who are going, hey, when's the next issue of this coming out? Hey, it's a Kiwi creator, man. Let's be honest. It's going to be 6 months, but he says he's doing it. I've seen some progress pages. We're going to get it, and you'll move through it. But I don't have to do the hard work in the shop of that, because at that point, I'm better off doing Chronicles of the Wasteland. It's cool. It's a cool story, and we've done that. We've done that push in the store. But for me, I'm better off. You know, if I've got a new person saying, I want to check something out, I mean, my go-to for the last 2 years has been Slaughterhouse 5. And we sold a couple of hundred copies of that. And that also is one that people read and come back and go, you were right. That 5-minute blurb you gave me as to why I should read this has really, made sense. And I will now trust you again. That's gorgeous, man. That board, by the way. That is fantastic.
Well, like I said, he's my good friend. So, I get on the grid.
I got my toilet. So when I had the crappy background, I quickly went and grabbed an action figure. So I got my Dread, you got your Death. All right. What do you got, Rex? Anything judge on you?
Oh, man. No figures. I don't think I've got an Evangelion head somewhere around there. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, talking about that aspect of like, give me 4 issues. So, I have meetings with creatives all the time because of what I do, right? In my position. So this morning I had one. Well, actually this afternoon about 2ish, and American studio with a book and stuff, and we're talking about this whole thing that we're just talking about right now. If your book isn't quality enough to be in that store, and not only that you are taking forever to get it out, why would you expect the store to actually back you? Because why not just get all your books together and then put it out and go, here's my 6 issues, and then you can do like, if you're local, then you can go, hey, you know what? But I understand about with self-publishing, with all the other stuff, but I'm thinking about like overseas people. They do 6 issues, but then the other aspect of this, and I was talking to Tom Hutchison just before this, who's a Big Dog Inc., and he was saying a lot of people just stick to like 6 issues and that's it. They never have anything else for the comic store to carry on with. It's like, oh, we put all this effort into this, and now you're gone and you're done. But what's next? And it's not really helping the comic store. So I mean, like, personally, I'm going to make sure that everything we do is complete books. And now that comes out, then I can come up and go, hey, here's this. Would it be okay for? Because that's why I haven't done anything with our books in New Zealand, because I'm like, let's make sure that I have published and printed books available to be out there. And I think a lot of time people just think that you should get the support just because you're Kiwi. Right.
There's I've had people, I'm there are some New Zealand comic creators who hate my guts. Okay, let's not lie about it. I don't care. They've come into the shop with something, and I've basically looked at it and said, dude, I've spent hundreds of thousands setting up the store and promoting it and being it, and I present a really nice store. I've got really nice. I always have nice lighting to make that's just important in retail for women customers. I mean, I'm paying rent every week, right? And you want me to put this pile of crap on my counter? I'm embarrassed by what you think is a comic, let alone what you want me to do with it. And I've had some real blunt conversation. I had one guy, I said, dude, look at your lettering. This looks like an 8-year-old has just scribbled down the page. And he goes, oh, it's a stream of consciousness. I'm like, well, do your stream of consciousness onto a piece of paper and then neatly transcribe it onto the comic. Respect your target market. That's the big thing about it. You've got to show respect for the person that wants to buy it. And I'm one of those people. You're asking me to buy it. And the whole, you just take them, and when you sell it, you give us the money. We've tried that a few times. I'm like, mate, you've just taken up real estate on my shelf for 2 years for me to sell six copies. I have lost money carrying your comic. We all know that, was it Coke pays supermarkets to have their product in prime spots. We're obviously not moving to that, but I think some creators need to understand that that's where it's kind of at. I pay rent every week. And so every part of the store has to somehow return me something. Now,
Exactly.
I will put a New Zealand comic on the counter to say I'm promoting New Zealand comics. And that can be
Yeah.
something for me if the quality inside is good enough and it's not selling fast, but it has to sell. And the other part that I really hate, that I absolutely hate the most, and if you're a New Zealand creator and you're listening to this, just don't do this to me, okay? Don't print a comic, sell 200 copies to everyone you know, and then bring it to me when there's no market, when there's no market left, okay? When it's like, oh, I've sold 200 copies, great. Go sell another 100, and then I'll take 20. But if you've sold it to the only 200 people you know who are going to buy this, I'm not your dumping ground, mate. Or if you're going to do that, understand that I'm probably going to have to do this in a sale. I'm probably going to have to crush it out. So if this is a $9.95 comic, then I'll buy them off you at $1.50 each or $2. This is essentially the back issue market. You're going straight to the back issue market, and that's hard because you want to support. You want to, I was the Chronicles of the Wasteland. I gave a pretty honest review of it, of how I thought it could be reviewed and improved, and then we'd sell it. And I really loved that we were listened to, and that that it was taken on board. Because we want to be stocking it, man. Ant Sang's stuff is fantastic. Albone's Dusk is by Ben Stembeck, whoever's Sue, if you're chucking that up and paying attention.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, he didn't do that. I know, and I've interviewed Ant, and he hasn't said anything about that. But here's the thing.
That's Ben's work,
Yeah. So here's the thing about comic. Here's the thing about comic creators, right? As a creator, like, and having conversations with comic creators, a lot of them don't understand the end user. They really don't. They're so passionate about their babies. And I just put a post out today about kill your babies, right? Because I kill my babies all the time. I have to now because I got to make sure that I'm competing with the end user. So if I want my book right up there with, my book up there with Batman, I want to have to be the same quality, if not okay. But the art's got to be good. The production value's got to be good. And it's got to be, a quality, readable quality as well, because I want return customers. I want return customers. I don't want one
criticism. Take the criticism. Take the professional criticism. There's been a few comics where they've tried to launch with anthologies, and they've got, they've come out of the South Island where they've had, 4 stories in a comic, and Dylan Horrocks has done one of them or something, or Ant has done one, and then there's 3 others that are really quite cool, and then there's 4 that look like they were done in the back of a maths book because the kid wasn't interested in stats over the period of 4 weeks. Right? They are shocking, and I keep saying to the people who are doing this, who's your editor? Why aren't you? There's the genesis of a decent idea in what this person's come up with, because that's the other thing. That's what people really struggle with, is your idea is really, really quite cool. Your execution is appalling. Now, if you go and make these changes, you might actually have something that people are actually going to engage in. But the way you've done it, no one's going to read this. And the people who are like, oh, nah, you can tell it was like they were only ever interested in doing one comic, right? When you want them to go home and make the changes, they're learning guitar now because they want to write a song. And the next time you see them, they're getting into video game design, and they've got a great idea for a video game. That's cool, man. That's part of growing up and doing all those phases. But print it and give it to your mum and your parents and your auntie and uncle, whatever, but don't bring it into a comic shop to sell. You don't have to. That's the other thing. Just because you managed to sequentially put people into panels with dialogue doesn't mean it has to be printed and sent around the world. It just might be a good idea that you had once, and that's cool. Why can't that be enough?
Or just turn into a webcomic, digital. It's there.
Totally. Do that. And then get some real honest feedback. And then,
I mean,
fair enough.
When we put out like comics, like I think we put out Robot Nation, which is our next one coming out. I sent it to 10 people, like a review copy. And I said, hey, Let me know what you think, and I want your honest opinion because that's what I want. I don't want so it's like, oh, you did well, dude. That was cool. You did
Tear it apart. Tear it
Yeah,
apart. That's
and-
what you want to send it to them and say. Yeah.
Yeah, and we, you know, it came back with a couple of things, and I went, yeah, okay, let's change it, and we did because
Yeah.
we're going to go to print. I rather
Yeah.
like, you know, rather get all that fixed before I go to print because by the time I go to print and go to the public, it's too late. You know.
Yeah.
And I
You,
think
you almost want to go with what don't you like, and
That's
then
it.
and then you can choose whether to take that on board or not. But just say I don't care what parts you like. What don't you like? And it can be as inane as, you know, in the bottom of that panel, her leg looked weird.
Yeah.
You know, when I looked at that twice, and that can be like, oh man, I you know, that's
Yeah, I had that.
but you
Yeah.
want to see that because you don't want 20% of the people who read it to go, what's with that leg?
Exactly.
Like, what'd you do, man? Come on.
Yeah.
Are there? I mean, Stu, are there kind of? I was listening to your podcast a little bit throughout the week. You brought up sort of lettering being neglected as sort of a common pitfall. A lot of New Zealand creators and smaller creators fall into. Are there sort of common pitfalls that you see sort of again and again and again that just sort of aren't on people's radars that maybe they should be aware of?
Lettering is the biggest. Like it is the absolute biggest issue because sometimes if people are using a web-based or some I don't know what software they're using to do the lettering, it can focus on the word balloon, right? And sometimes that can be way too big and it can block out art. So you end up with this little bit of text and this word balloon around it that's just crazy. It's just taken over so much. Or, I mean, that's just fantastic lettering. It's the exact amount you need per word balloon.
Thank you. It's me lettering. I letter my own books.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to get your opinion on it without telling you that's my book.
You probably heard me grizzle about lettering and thought, oh, if we're going to get Stu on, we better pay attention to the lettering. All right.
No. It's been something that's been nibbling at me forever since I've been reading comics. People putting friggin' over artwork that's beautiful and like covering that work has always annoyed me for decades.
Yeah.
Right? Because like seriously, like I'm an artist as well, but I don't letter. I mean, I don't illustrate.
Yeah.
And if somebody went and started putting, graffiti on my work, I'm going to be like, hey, dude, I worked hard on this. Why are you doing that? Why don't you move it graffiti just to the side? Right?
Yeah.
Go graffiti over here. And it's the same thing I see with comic pages. I actually tell my artists, I go, look, I'm working with you with this one.
Yeah.
When I I'll let you know where the bubbles are going to go so you don't have to concentrate on that. And plus, when I put this work out, your work's not going to be covered. And it's going to look right. And provide me space as well. Please provide me space to put those bubbles in.
Space, yeah. That's a balance of a good comic. So what you've got looking at this panel is, because another thing that I really hate, because I wander when I read comics, I wander the page, is talking heads. There's nothing I hate more than, there's nothing in the background. It's a brown wall. And there's not even a picture hanging on it or something like that. So it's really nice to see the background is fleshed out, and it just, because that's what I talked about earlier on. Comics it's you're interpreting an image, you're making sense of the action in the gutter, and you're reading it all at once. If you are just doing talking heads on a brown background, we've actually removed the idea of actually having to make up the space. So that's nice. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, this is a second go at this comic, by the way, because the first one I did it and it was like, it wasn't color, it was coming more of a web comic, self-funded, and then I got to it and I was like, this is not what I want to put out. After paying for it to be printed, this is not what I want to put out. This is not going to be able to compete what my art is and work is with anybody else in the shop. So I'm going to go back and I reworked everything, rewrote the script, got a new artist on, got a color as well, and did a full thing. And I was like, and I think that's killing your babies, right? Like really, like.
And once you've had your baby and you want to get it out there, I know that, like, if you want me to value you, then value yourself as well and your time. So we get people, and you can see that they've spent like 500 hours on these, on 100 pages or 64 pages of comic. So And then, and you're like, okay, what's it? And they look at it and go, well, they're going to cost me $8 each to print. So, you know, I want $10 for them. And I'm like, mate, so I can't sell this for 20. I can't put this next to Batman and sell this for $20. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So the market for your book is, this is an $8 comic. Okay. I can probably sell 20 copies of your 64-page comic for $8. Which means I'm giving you $4 for them. And they're like, oh, but I paid $8 for them. I'm like, no, you didn't. You paid 500 hours of your life for this. Do you now want to get this out and for people to consume it? So forget the fact that at the end of your 500 hours, you then spent $500 as well to get a production run done. Okay. Your goal, if you've gone and printed 100 copies or whatever it is, your goal is for 100 copies to sell in a comic shop or sell around the internet. And if that means you lose money on every single one, that's part of the journey, man. You know, you talked before about the idea of comics being, you know, going direct to graphic novels. I have the pleasure that my absolute favorite comic artist in the world is Nick Pitara, and we're mates. Like, we're really good mates. I've been to bars with him in Texas. I just hooked up with him in New York Comic Con in October. Like, we saw each other. It was like lavender field, bro, how are you? Had a couple of good nights out, and he's at the point now where all the work he's done, that he is on Kickstarter doing a graphic novel direct, like a 128-page graphic novel. So he's just sitting at home, and it goes straight to there, and it pumps out at like, I don't know how many thousand copies he did of these kind of books. So he's got to that level, but he paid his dues, man. Like, he lost money for a long time pursuing his dream of being a comic book artist. And so when you spend all of that time creating something that looks really cool, and then you completely unrealistically miss the point of the market. You know, it's like a 19-year-old who's really, really good. My daughter makes, she's really good at sewing. She makes dresses. She sells dresses to people as well, even though she's just finished school. But the time she spends on it, she knows she can't charge that out. She's got a part-time job at whatever, $25 an hour. If she spends, 20 hours on a dress, she knows she's not selling it for $500. She's getting $150 tops. And she understands that, hey, the person who's just brought this dress has gone, my God, this is better than anything I was going to buy. I've got my own personalized dress. I'm going to tell some people. And she knows in 3 or 4 years' time, she'll be selling dresses for $800. She'll get to that. But for now, she'll lose them. Yeah. Limited amounts of graphic novels, does it? Steve J. Hunter's got a question here.
Yeah, that's a great question.
That's people buying graphic novels. There are some shops. So again, I'm on various comic shop forums, and there are some comic shops that are of the opinion that every single piece of pop culture that is sold within a 10-mile radius of their shop must go through their store. And if it's not, and if it doesn't, then the creators or the publishers or whoever is sticking it to them. I've set up a comic shop, therefore every single comic within 20 miles of my store in Newmarket must go through me. That's just unrealistic. So the warehouse selling graphic novels, that's getting people reading, so that's good. And the only problem I ever have with this is if you shop at the warehouse, you're not going to get any help, right? They'll point you to an aisle, where do you sell coffee jugs? They're down that road. No one's going to actually come in and say, how many people are you making a cup of coffee for? This is the right size jug you want. You're not going to get any of that kind of help at the warehouse. So my only fear of that is parents buying comics or graphic novels as gifts with no idea of what they're getting for that particular person they're buying for, and nobody at the warehouse is going to be able to help you with that as well. As I said, if someone comes into the shop and they're like, oh, I'm buying a gift for such and such, how old are they? What are they into? What do they like? Do you know what movies they're into? And we will tailor that purchase. So my only concern is that people are going to have graphic novels bought for them from the warehouse as potentially as a gift, and the kid's not interested at all, and that doesn't help anybody. That ends up in a library being cut into stamps, probably. Yeah.
I've noticed going to Steve's question, I've noticed that the warehouse Yeah, the manga selection, I should say, is pretty extensive, but their Western stuff is a lot of number one, so I could see them sort of maybe picking up the first copy, the first volume, and then going, "Oh, this is great. I'll go over here. Is for sale, or what's this about?" So it's a good entry point.
And the other thing is, no matter what you do, reading is a personal experience. Like six of us can go to a movie, watch it, come out and talk about it afterwards, or you can sit down and you can watch the rugby or the Super Bowl on TV. But when you read, there's just you reading. So at the end of that reading, if you've read something and you're excited by it, who are you going to call? You know, so I think a big part of where we work is, you know, and we get that with our graphic novel club that we run. The book we just did last month was Bodies, which is on Netflix. And the first time around that you read that graphic novel, it is incomprehensible. It's like, what have I just read? And how did this get made? Like, this came out in 8 single issues. How did it get past issue 2? This is a confused pile of crap. You stick 10 people around at a table, each fizzing on the parts they really liked, and you get to the end of it, and it's like, this is one of my new favorite books ever. This is a work of art and is genius. And I don't think the warehouse are doing graphic novel clubs. So
but I mean, it's also like entry level, right? If there's no if there's no comic store,
they've got a pretty good selection. I mean, I was surprised to see them stock it at all, and I mean, I think I've got a stack I bought from the warehouse. I mean, it's pretty young reading. You know, there's not a lot of mature stuff, but it's not just like Batman and Robin and One Piece and My Hero Academia. You know, there was some pretty interesting kind of like stuff there. I forgot what Delilah Dirk. I found this thing. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Delilah Dirk.
Yeah, I picked that up. I was like, I've just had a daughter. I was having a daughter at the time. You know, my partner was pregnant, and I went, "Oh, this looks interesting. What's it doing at a warehouse?" And I flicked it up. I was like, "This looks fantastic." I'll put this away, and maybe in I don't know, 8 years time, she's flicking away.
Delilah Dirk was about 12, 13, I think, there, Rex. I don't think I'd be giving it to her.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, we'll sit on a little longer, maybe.
8 years is probably Tinkerbell is some good graphic novels for an 8-year-old. Yeah. Especially for reading. It'll help the reading. Yeah, nice work, Stephen. Okay. Yeah.
I mean,
Steve, what do you mean by that?
He goes and puts adverts. He puts adverts for Heroes for Sale inside graphic novels at the warehouse, I think is what he's saying.
Oh, all right.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So people know.
It's pretty cool.
Strategy.
That's really good.
I asked it a little while ago, but I think we sort of went on a segue. I mean, do you think, Stu, that sort of the comic book industry does enough to kind of onboard younger readers? Is that something that you think that they do well enough? How could they do it better, or am I out of my off base?
I think I think I do. Sue and I do more for that with the work we do with Slanza and schools and libraries. Just making sure that they've got the right stuff in there, which comes back to reading for pleasure. So those kids like I said, at the age of 8, they're reading Tinkerbell. They're reading when they're evolving with it. And a lot of what I've learned for how to do this has been using my daughter as a guinea pig. What are you going to read?
Right.
And when she got to about 12 or 13, she'd stopped reading for pleasure at all. And I was like, I need to get back onto this. And I thought, well, if you're not going to read comics and graphic novels, then you've got to read books. So next thing you know, my 13-year-old daughter is reading vampire stories that have inappropriate content, I guess is the easiest. Something novels. Something that Dad would rather the kid wasn't reading. But that's the other thing with reading with kids is that it's got to be edgier. It's got to be a little bit ahead of it's almost, if it's a secret or if Dad wouldn't approve, it makes it easier, or better for them to enjoy. So
I think I've got a Twilight box set to the left of my head, so I can't really poo-poo on it.
I watched all of that.
Oh man, I remember watching the last one, and I mean it's been so long, but there was some part where there was a big, I watched them all with my girlfriend. I was like, oh, I can't be dealing with this. Like at the end, it's like the last one. I'm happy it's over. And there was some bit. I think it was a massive battle scene, right? And I was like, well, this is kind of heating up. It's pretty good. And then it turned out it never happened. I almost set the theater on fire. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it was all a dream, type thing.
I'd watched them all with my oldest daughter. She kind of grew up to the level of those Twilight films, and then I managed to get a couple of tickets to the New Zealand premiere, which was a big red carpet event out at Sylvia Park, and they had the TV crews were there. And I mean, I'm recognised. I've done interviews. I've done quite a few interviews on TV around comics and things like that. So I like to think I interview well. So they came up and asked for an interview, and I've got to be honest. I think I watched all of those Twilight films hammered. Like I would have been drunk. There's the only way I could have sat through them. So I really had no idea, even though I'd watched them all. And this was the first film I was going in to see straight because I had to drive. And they were like, oh, hi Stu, how you doing? What do you like most about the Twilight films? And I just said, I like the werewolves, like completely oblivious. But knowing that there's werewolves in this story, and I didn't want to say, I think the vampires are freaking stupid the way they glow. So I just
right.
And then 15 minutes into it, one of the werewolves has taken his shirt off, and it was like the gayest thing I think I've ever seen in cinema. And my daughter turns to me and goes, yeah, that's the werewolf angle to the Twilight films, man. It's there for all the gay guys to ogle over as these guys run around bare chested. So on national television, I'm like, I like the werewolves.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, hey, the things you do for your family and your loved ones, I guess, the things you endure.
And I've been waiting for the noise to die down, so I could have some time to think back to when I wanted to be where I am now, free of problems I had then, but taken up by more now.